United States and was acquired by a public company in 2009. So if you remember 2009, that was a very, very bad time for our country in the wake of the financial crisis. And I was here in Iowa like just yesterday, and someone said, it was a college student, he said that he remembers his father literally just losing his job during this time. And I'm sure it was a very tough time for him. So where I was in New York at that point, I said, this is really a train wreck where our financiers have tanked the economy. And so I thought, well, what would I rather these financiers be doing? And the vision I had was that I would want them to move to places like Detroit and Cleveland and St. Louis and Birmingham and start businesses. So I quit my job to start a nonprofit called Venture for America. I donated $120,000 to seed the organization and started calling rich friends asking them, do you love America? And then the smartest among them said, what does it mean if I say yes? And I said, at least $10,000. And so 12 of them said, I love America for $10,000. So we launched with a budget of around $250,000 in 2011. Fast forward to today, our budget's between $6 and $7 million. Created about 3,000 jobs in 18 cities around the country. I received awards and an honorary appointment in the Obama administration, also known as the Good White House, for my work with Venture for America. So I was getting these accolades, and if you like documentaries, there's actually a movie made about my organization that's now on Netflix, if you have Netflix and like documentaries. It's called Generation Startup. It follows 6 entrepreneurs around Detroit for a year and a half as they try and build businesses. Now, I had never been to Michigan, Ohio, Alabama, Louisiana before starting Venture for America. And one of the things that struck me was the massive disparity between, let's call it San Francisco and Detroit, or Cleveland and Manhattan, where when I was making these trips, I felt like I was crossing decades instead of 2 time zones. And so I began to be troubled by the fact that here people were clapping me on the back, and I did not think I was addressing the fundamental problems in the economy. And then when Donald Trump became our president in 2016, I realized that I was more right than I'd ever imagined. Where Donald Trump's victory, and you're all Democrat, actually I shouldn't take that for granted. How many of you all are Democrats? I get this on most of you. Right, and if you're not, it's cool. But I'm a Democrat myself, and I was stunned by Trump's victory, and I started digging into the reasons why. Now, what are the main reasons that are being bandied about by the media as to Trump's victory? There's something like Russia, racism, Facebook, the FBI, and I think all of that is dead wrong. To me, the reason why Donald Trump is our president today, and the reason he won Iowa by almost 10 points, is that we automated away 4 million manufacturing jobs in Michigan, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Missouri, and 40,000 right here in Iowa. And unfortunately, my friends in Silicon Valley know full well that what we did to the manufacturing jobs, we are now going to do to the retail jobs, the call center jobs, the fast food jobs, and soon the truck driving jobs. And what the forces that got Donald Trump, now you just winced at that, you're like, truck driving jobs, those jobs can't go anywhere. But they are going to disappear, and I can walk you through how that's going to happen. We're in the 3rd inning of the greatest economic and technological transformation in the history of our country. And the 3rd inning has brought us Donald Trump. The 1st inning is the deregulation of financial services. The 2nd is the decimation of manufacturing workers. The 3rd one, which we're in right now, is the phasing out of brick and mortar retail. 30% of American malls and Main Street stores are going to close in the next 4 years. How many of you have noticed stores closing around where you live? Now, why are your stores closing? There's a one-word answer. Amazon, that's right. Amazon's sucking up another $20 billion in business every year, and it's getting sucked right out of your communities, and it's getting spirited off to Seattle and the cloud. Now, you can survive for a while, but that cumulative effect is now closing 30% of malls and Main Street stores. And working in a retail establishment is the most common job in the country. The average retail worker is a 39-year-old woman with a high school degree making between $11 to $12 an hour. So the question is, what's going to happen to those workers when those stores and malls close? The 4th inning is going to be self-driving cars and trucks. And so, what's your name, Miss?
Mrs. Naylor.
Mrs. Naylor.
Patty.
Patty. we're among friends.
That wasn't your question.
So I just passed Iowa 80, the biggest truck stop in the country, that you all know well. Being a truck driver is the most common job in 29 states. There are at least 30,000 truckers here in Iowa. Now, Patty's like, how the heck can you get rid of truck drivers? How many of you have actually seen the videos of self-driving trucks, like on YouTube and whatnot? Now, one headline came out just yesterday that Amazon is now testing self-driving trucks in the West right now.
In the West.
In the Midwest, actually. They have like this, now they have a human there. They were like sort of watching the truck. Now, I have friends in Silicon Valley who tell me that they are 98% of the way to autonomous trucks. Now, 2% is still a big gap, because you can't have 2% of trucks slamming into things. That would be a massive problem. But they believe that they can get the rest of the way there in the next 5 to 10 years. And one of the reasons why they're quite confident about it is that the financial incentives for them to automate truck driving are $168 billion per year. And not just labor savings, but also fuel efficiencies, equipment utilization, because the trucks never stop, fewer accidents, because right now 4,000 Americans die in accidents with truckers every year. And their vision for doing this is what's called teleoperators, where they're going to have people in a warehouse in Nevada or Arizona who beam into the truck when the truck's not sure what to do. So imagine a robot truck, and then the weather is bad or the road is poorly marked. So the robot beeps and says, I'm not sure what to do, and then the teleoperator then beams into the truck and can just see what the truck can see and just takes control of it like a video game until the computer's sure what to do again. And then when the computer's sure, they beam back out. Now, there are 3.5 million truck drivers in this country right now. What do you all think the ratio is going to be between teleoperators and truck drivers?
1 in 10.
Yeah, maybe 10%. So you're looking at hundreds of thousands of trucking jobs eliminated over the next 10 years or so. And the average truck driver is a 49-year-old man with a high school degree making about $46,000 a year. So you have to ask yourself, what would hundreds of thousands of now displaced truck drivers do to replace that income? And that's a rhetorical question because nobody knows. And the answer, in my opinion, is quite dark. To me, many of these truck drivers are going to show up at state capitals with their trucks and their guns and protest the robot trucks that are putting them out of business. And one reason why, to me, that's a near certainty is that about 350,000 of these truckers took out loans to buy their own trucks. So imagine if you took out loans to buy a truck that then can't compete with a robot truck. Are you really just going to go home and be like, well, I guess that's that? I mean, that's highly unlikely. 80,000 truckers are ex-military. So you can see this coming down the pike very clearly. We're in the third inning of this transformation, and for whatever reason, our leaders are completely asleep at the switch. And I know this because I went and talked to our leaders. After Trump won, I started going through the data. I said, look, there's a very direct correlation between the adoption of industrial robots in a voting district and the movement towards Trump. The reason why he's our president today is that we're automating away the jobs. We're about to automate away the most common jobs in this economy. What are we going to do? What's the plan? And what do you think Democratic leaders in Washington, D.C. said to me when I came to them with this question?
No plan.
No plan. The answers I got were literally, we cannot talk about that. We should study that. And the last one that seems the most reasonable, we must educate and retrain Americans for the jobs of the future. And then I said, look guys, I took a look at the independent studies as to how effective government-funded retraining programs are. You guys want to guess how effective government-funded retraining programs are on a percentage basis?
30%.
It's a very good guess. The real number is 0 to 15%. They're essentially entirely ineffective. And so then when I said to the policymakers, look, our retraining programs don't work, then they said, well, I guess we'll have to get better at it. And then I said, that's horrifying. And so I had to come back home after these trips and try and wrestle with the reality. Are we so far gone as a society that our leadership cannot even acknowledge the central set of issues that are tearing our communities apart, much less address them? You're nodding, sir. Yeah. That is what
We are.
Yeah, we are. We really are that far gone. Unfortunately, both of our parties are unable to confront this reality. And so this is when I decided to run for president. I said, look, this is the biggest set of problems in our history, perhaps, And I'm a father, I'm a parent, I'm an American, and I'm not going to just sit by and watch my country careen into, frankly, unrecognizability in the next number of years, which it will. So I started to draw out the plan as to how we can help millions of Americans transition through this time. So I have 3 big policy proposals, one of which you've probably heard of. How many of you have heard of, like, Andrew Yang wants to give everyone $1,000 a month? Something like that. Yeah, that's my basic association, I understand it.
I thought you were going to start today, wasn't it?
Well, I actually am personally going to give someone here in Iowa $1,000 a month. So if you know someone who could use $1,000 a month, just go to just go to yang2020.com and nominate your friend. You can just like tag team and nominate each other. We'll never know. But I'm just going to give someone $1,000 a month just to, and I cleared it with FBC. They're like, as long as it's your money and it's going as a personal gift, like no problem. And you don't actually ask them to do anything, and we don't ask you to do anything. It's just, just illustrating common sense.
Is the 64-year-old cutoff true to your proposal? I point out the white hair in the room.
Yes, and it is not. So we've changed the proposal, so now it's just 18 and up. So everyone's covered.
Thank you.
And that was the original proposal was because we thought Social Security was frankly a little bit more robust than it is. And then after I was made aware of the fact that actually $1,000 would be extraordinarily helpful, like past that age, then we amended it. So the plan is to give every American adult $1,000 a month. And I know some of you are like, that literally sounds too good to be true. It maybe even makes you doubt my my attachment to reality. But if you dig into our history, this is a deeply American idea. Thomas Paine was for it at the founding of the country. Decades later, Martin Luther King was for it. Milton Friedman and 1,000 economists signed a study in the 70s saying this would be great for our economy. And it passed the House of Representatives twice in 1971 under Richard Nixon. The only reason it didn't become law was that Senate Democrats wanted an even higher income threshold. And then it became law in one state where now everyone in that state gets between $1,000 and $2,000 a year, no questions asked. And what state is that?
Alaska.
And how does Alaska fund it?
Oil.
And what is the oil of the 21st century?
Technology.
Technology, that's right. What they're doing in Alaska, we can do for everyone here in Iowa and everyone across the country. Now, I want to really delve into what Alaska shows us. So 1982, it's a Republican governor. This is a deep red state. Culturally, in some ways similar to other places in the country that are like quite conservative. And a Republican governor came in and said, a lot of oil in the ground, a lot of money. Who would you rather get the money? The government, who's just going to screw it up, or you? And the Alaskan people said, us please. And he said, I thought you'd say that. And now everyone in Alaska gets between $1,000 and $2,000 a year, no questions asked. It's created thousands of jobs, improved children's health and nutrition, decreased income inequality, and it's wildly popular in a deep red state. It's so popular that a majority of Alaskans have said, I would even accept higher taxes to pay for my petroleum dividend because I love it so much. So what they've done in Alaska, we can 100% do in the rest of the country. And I'm going to suggest to you all, we need to do this. Because if we do not, we're going to be heading for a disastrous future where the stores close, the trucks don't stop, drive themselves, the call center workers get sent home as AI takes it over. I went to law school. I now have friends who are investing tens of millions of dollars in automating away basic legal work. Think about that. Being a lawyer used to be the most secure profession any of us can imagine for our kids. It's like, oh, be a lawyer. Like, that's a sure thing. And now if you look at the numbers, law school graduates are graduating with 6 figures in debt, and many of them cannot find jobs because my friends are working on software that takes out basic legal work. And so now the value-added legal work is the rainmaking work where you can have client relationships who can bring in business to the firm. But what fresh law school graduate can be a rainmaker? Like, no one. What's happening is we're climbing the ladder and then just pulling it up behind us. So if we don't make a move like the freedom dividend, then the future is going to be quite rough for most Americans in the years to come. If we do adopt something like the freedom dividend, I have to say, it would be so transformative in a place like Iowa, in rural areas. And again, you think it's too good to be true. $1,000 a month for every adult in Iowa would increase the size of your economy by about 15%, or $16 billion. It would create 40,000 new jobs here in Iowa, because we know what would happen to the money. If everyone here were to get $1,000 a month, where would that money go?
Spend it.
You'd spend it. It'd stay right here in Iowa. You'd spend it on car repairs and home repairs you've been putting off, and food and tutoring for your kids and grandkids. Most of that money would stay right here. And that would happen here and in communities around the country. So the other thing I love as a parent, it makes children and families stronger. It helps millions of women both get rewarded and compensated for the work that's done every day that right now the market values at zero. And it also enables millions of women to walk away from exploitative and abusive jobs and relationships. If the Democratic Party is truly going to be the party of female empowerment, there's nothing better we could do than to pass a dividend. So that's plan number one, the freedom dividend. Hopefully now it seems much more rational to you all. And we can pay for it quite straightforwardly because our economy is now up to $20 trillion, up $5 trillion in the last 12 years. And a lot of this growth from AI and new technology is going to enhance our wealth in unprecedented ways. But of course, right now that wealth's going to come nowhere near Iowa, frankly. Jeff Bezos is worth $160 billion, soon to be $80 billion. It's true. But that money, again, it's just getting sucked up out of communities here in Iowa, never to return. So we have to take that value back and return it to you and your children. So that's plan number one. Plan number two is getting healthcare off the backs of American families and businesses. We have to move towards single-payer healthcare, Medicare for all. Right now, when you get sick or injured in this country, you're more concerned about navigating the healthcare bureaucracy and paying for treatment than you are getting well. And that's completely backwards. It's immoral. We spend twice as much on our healthcare as other countries do. Anyone who's like, oh, you can't afford this, it's like, are you kidding me? We spend 18% of GDP on this stuff, and we're getting gouged. Everyone knows the horror stories about someone who got a bill for like $12,000 for some like ambulance ride. Like, so when it's like you don't have the money for it, it's like, well, like, why is everything so crazy expensive in our healthcare system? And it's because the incentives are not aligned. We go to a single payer, the government has a public option, comes in and says, hey guys, guess what? That ambulance ride is now $300. And then if you were the healthcare provider, if you're dealing with the government, there's, like you have a very, very powerful buyer. So that's number two, single payer healthcare, Medicare for all, public option. And then number three, now I referenced my family. My wife is at home right now with our two young boys, one of whom is autistic. And what does GDP value her work at right now? Nothing. And the market also values her work at nothing. And we all know that's also completely backwards. We know that the work she's doing is some of the most important and valuable work that we're going to need more and more of in the future. So we need to evolve from GDP, which is a measurement we made up almost 100 years ago during the Great Depression. And even the inventor of GDP said this is a terrible measurement for national well-being. We should include motherhood and parenthood in the number. And we should not include military defense spending because it has no value. Now, of course, we ignored all of those things, and now we're going to ride GDP off a cliff. So to use one of my earlier examples, if you have self-driving cars and trucks, that's going to be great for GDP. But it's going to be very, very bad for many Americans. So what we have to do, and as a CEO, I'll tell you, you make what you measure. If we measure GDP, we're just going to keep driving ourselves off a cliff. So what should we measure that would actually improve your lives, our lives? Like, how should we measure the economy?
Quality of living.
Quality of living. Affordability, quality of life, health.
Restoring the environment.
Environmental quality, clean air and clean water. Mental health and freedom from substance abuse. Childhood success rates. Proportion of elderly who can retire in quality circumstances. These are actually how we could tell how we're doing, and then we can drive our economy in those directions. We have to redefine the measurements, and then we can redefine everything else. And I'll tell you, this is not that hard. I'm President of the United States. I don't even need an act of Congress. I just go to the Bureau of Labor and Statistics and say, hey guys, GDP is kind of old. It's time for an upgrade. It's time for the American scorecard. We build this composite measurement. And then the great thing is if you build that composite measurement, then you can start directing corporate behaviors in very, very different ways. And I speak to CEOs, and they tell me, my hands are tied. I just have to optimize for one variable, which is profitability. That's the truth, especially if they're publicly traded. So if we change the measuring sticks, we can actually free people up to be accountable to more than just their shareholders. So those are the three big proposals. Number one, freedom dividend, everyone gets $1,000 a month. Number two, single payer healthcare. And number three, the American scorecard, the next generation of GDP. Now I have another 77 proposals on my website, yank2020.com. I'm not even joking, I actually do have like 38 proposals. Because I'm a very, very thorough man. But those are the three big ones that would help us manage this economy moving forward.